This program is brought to you by Link TV for educational and non-commercial use only. Mosaic, a daily news program from Link TV, presents a selection of news reports from independent and state-controlled broadcasters from throughout the Middle East.
انتقد رئيس الوزراء العراقي نور المالكي بشدة.
Iraq's Prime Minister Nour al-Maliki has strongly criticized a statement issued by those he described as partisan leaders in the U.S. and said that such comments are discourteous and out of political and diplomatic context. In a press conference in Syria, al-Maliki added that no one has the right to place timetables on the Iraqi government because it was elected by its people. This news comes after some U.S. senators called for the replacement of al-Maliki. In a previous statement, U.S. President George Bush expressed frustration with the leadership in Iraq.
From the Syrian capital, Damascus, Iraq's Prime Minister Nour al-Maliki sent a counter-message to Washington. Al-Maliki said that no one has the right to place timetables on his elected government.
Some officials or partisans have issued statements that are discourteous and out of political and diplomatic context. Everyone knows that the Iraqi government was elected by the Iraqi people, and no one has the right to place timetables or restrictions on it. The Iraqi people who elected the government are the only ones who can place timetables.
Al-Maliki's response seems to ignore a statement issued by the chairman of the Senate Armed Services Committee, Carl Levin, who said during a visit to Iraq that al-Maliki has one last opportunity to make progress on national reconciliation. Levin's comments coincided with a statement issued by U.S. President George Bush, who expressed frustration with al-Maliki's government. Bush said that al-Maliki's government did not meet the demands of the Iraqi people. He added that the Iraqi people will replace the government if it doesn't meet their demands. Al-Maliki said that those who make such statements are bothered by his visit to Damascus.
We are concerned over such statements. Those who issued them yesterday may be bothered by our visit to Syria. They issued these remarks because they might want to discuss them among themselves or with others, and we pay no attention to them.
Meanwhile, the U.S. ambassador to Iraq, Ryan Crocker, described Iraq's political progress as extremely disappointing. Some Iraqi political blocs that have recently withdrawn from the Iraqi parliament tried to capitalize on Crocker's comments and said that their withdrawal has to do with al-Maliki's failure to meet benchmarks on power sharing, which they say complicates the situation in the country.
The political circles and media outlets in Egypt have showed a great interest in the recent political developments in Iraq.
Some Egyptians have demanded that neighboring countries do not interfere in Iraq's internal affairs.
The recent political development and the polarization of Iraqi politicians have received a great deal of attention from the Egyptian media. Iraq continues to be an important country in the Arab world.
The Iraqi people in general must unite so they can take their country to safer grounds.
They must leave Iraq for the Iraqis. Iraq has capable leaders to lead the country. Just like Egypt has Egyptians to lead it, there should be no foreign intervention.
Egyptians talked about several issues, most importantly about dealing with Iraq in a spirit of love and honesty, covering the ongoing events in Iraq objectively and the latest meeting of the Iraqi political parties.
Neighboring countries should not allow armed individuals into Iraq who may stage a coup or cause explosions, among other things.
The Iraqis must unite and look after the interests of their country. They should not be preoccupied with power positions, such as ministerial positions. They should also not be preoccupied with their own personal interests. They should look after the oppressed Iraqi people who are living in a country full of resources, a country that has rivers, oil, and many other things.
The political process to rebuild Iraq has not been completed yet, and it has not been an easy task. A great deal of progress has been achieved at the political level, which is important to take the country into safety. Meanwhile, the Egyptian media has extensively covered the political developments in Iraq. Articles, news reports, and news analysis were written about the ongoing political situation in Iraq because of its importance and impact on Arab countries in the region.
U.S. soldiers were killed as their helicopter went down in northern Iraq early today. The accident is the deadliest since 2005. The military said the crash was caused by a mechanical problem in the aircraft. More details with our correspondent from Baghdad.
In the deadliest crash since January 2005, an American helicopter went down in northern Iraq early on Wednesday. All of the 14 American soldiers who were in the aircraft have been died in the accident. The military attributed the crash to a mechanical problem and excluded the possibility of hostile attack.
The helicopter crashed in northern Iraq, and on board were a crew of 4 soldiers and 10 soldiers who were passengers on that aircraft. And we mourn their loss. We send our thoughts and our prayers to their family. The helicopter appeared to have a mechanical malfunction, and there did not appear to be any hostile fire associated with the helicopter crashing.
Meanwhile, President Bush and American politicians directed tough criticisms against Prime Minister Noor al-Maliki and the Iraqi political leaders. That the American president explained his frustration with the political process, for politicians were unable to show progress with respect to the national accord. And he said replacing al-Maliki is up to the Iraqis. Iraqis on their part criticized the politicians.
There is no accord between the political blocs so far. Yes, we have heard about alliances and coalitions, but it's not for the country's interest. Otherwise, it's for personal interests, for the bloc's interests. We want to save the country from this situation, while the blocs are seeking for their own interests. The new political alliances are not successful. They didn't offer any new. The explosions continue. People are sacrificing their lives and losing their sons and their relatives. The fuel is so expensive and life is so miserable.
Various political blocs are intending to create a wide opposition against the Shiite Kurdish coalition, which was announced a week ago, according to the leader of the largest Sunni bloc, Adnan al-Dulaymi. Though al-Maliki's government didn't achieve any success in relate with reconciliation, replacing the prime minister won't be so promising if the political leaders themselves didn't reconsider their policies. Waddah Fadil, Saudi TV Channel 2, Baghdad.
3 months after the breakout of fighting at Nahr al-Barid, the militants of Fath al-Islam have, for the first time, requested a truce to allow their families to leave the refugee camp. But contacts was cut off before the army could have time to receive a list of the names of those waiting to be evacuated. Meanwhile, the humanitarian situation of the refugees was getting worse, with fears growing that they may never go back to their homes again. Our correspondent has more details in this report.
For the first time from the day the Battle of Nahr al-Barid erupted some 3 months ago, the militants of Fath al-Islam requested a truce from the Lebanese army. The truce aimed at allowing the families of the militants to leave the battered Nahr al-Barid refugee camp. The army had said in a statement that it had agreed to allow a safe passage to the families. But as the Lebanese army was awaiting for their list of persons to be evacuated, the contact with Fath al-Islam was lost. It is in this regard that the head of Hamas movement in Lebanon, Osama Hamdan, held a press conference in Beirut on Wednesday. Hamdan affirmed that the best of the solutions regarding Nahr al-Barid would have been political.
The key to the solution is political, but unfortunately, and for many reasons, this political path was not followed. Today, more than 3 months after the beginning of the war, we have to keep in mind that 4,000 refugees have fled the camp. They are enduring very hard situations, and it is their right to demand more support. We hereby call upon the Lebanese government to rebuild urgently the camp. It is a matter of political belonging. Whoever cares for the Palestinian cause should understand it is politically important that the refugees get back to Nahr al-Barid.
Hamdan added that he didn't believe the truce requested from the militants was just a stratagem to renew the fightings. On the humanitarian level, the ongoing battle is spreading fears among the refugees that they shall never be back to the camp.
There is a fear among the Palestinian refugees that they might never be back to the camp, as it happened years ago with the camp of Tell el-Zatar or Nabatiye. We assure that the only agreeable solution is by rebuilding the camp and allowing the refugees to get back to it. This is the only way to reassure the Palestinian refugees and to avoid the eruption of similar crises in other camps.
At least 200 people, including 141 soldiers, have been killed in the fighting since it broke out on May 20th. The more time passes, the more the conflict of Nahr al-Barid grows intricate. Indeed, even if the battle will end in just a few days, there will still be a huge humanitarian challenge. First, to reallocate the thousands of Palestinian civilians, and then to rebuild the camp, 100% destroyed. For Saudi Television Channel 2, this is Jumana Nahas, Beirut.
فور جهوز هذا الاتصال مجددا ونبقى في نهر البارد.
We now go back to Nahr al-Barid, where the fate of the refugees remains unknown in light of the continuing battles at the camp. With the reopening of the schools, the question remains, what will become of the displaced who have been residing at al-Badawi camp? Meanwhile, UNRWA is working on convincing them to accept to be transferred to other locations.
With
the beginning of another school year, efforts to convince the Nahr al-Barid refugees to evacuate the schools at Nahr al-Badawi have proved unfruitful. The displaced are refusing to evacuate the schools, putting pressure on UNRWA and the Lebanese government to provide them with a temporary residence, either on the outskirts of al-Barid or on the ruins of the camp.
We will only leave the UNRWA shelter to go back to Nahr al-Barid, even if we have to live in tents in the midst of ruins. That's our final decision.
We will only evacuate the schools to go to Nahr al-Barid. Till our death, we want al-Barid.
This situation is turning into a crisis, especially since UNRWA had announced that reclaiming Nahr al-Barid's land is now dealt with as a secondary concern. UNRWA has been searching for an alternative site where they can transport the refugees who are currently residing in the schools of al-Badawi. Their transfer is essential for the reopening of the schools. The refugees, however, have rejected this proposal and insist on finding land in the outskirts of Nahr al-Barid, maintaining their right of return.
Negotiations are ongoing and we are making every effort to convince the displaced. Other options remain open in case they refuse to relocate, something that will affect the school year, the students, and the refugees overall very negatively. We are trying to find other options. There is the possibility of renting other school buildings or the formation of temporary schools elsewhere.
The situation of Nahr al-Barid refugees continues to deteriorate and might be facing additional escalations. The question remains, what will be the fate of the upcoming school year, especially since the majority of the refugees here at al-Badawi schools made it clear that they're only willing to relocate to Nahr al-Barid. From al-Badawi camp, northern Lebanon, Adnan Gamloush, Al-Arabiya.
على
Commenting on the nuclear talks that were held in Tehran, the U.S. representative to the International Atomic Energy Agency, IAEA, said that Iran must stop playing games with the international inspectors. Tehran and the IAEA agreed on a timetable aimed at clearing outstanding questions regarding the Iranian nuclear program. The Iranians said that they have fully cooperated with the IAEA and allowed access for the international inspectors to its heavy water research reactor in Iraq, south of Tehran. Ahmad Barani reports from Tehran.
In a session that lasted for 2 days and 2 nights, the IAEA and Iran held a third round of talks in Tehran where they discussed the latter's nuclear program. The talks, which were described as rough, ended in a tour by the international inspectors to Iran's heavy water research reactor in Iraq, some 30 kilometers south of Tehran. This is the third and last round of talks between the Iranian Atomic Energy Agency and its international counterpart. This news comes after years of negotiations aimed at finding a platform of inspection and monitoring that is acceptable to both sides. The international delegation described the talks as very good and constructive and will lead to a fruitful future in terms of cooperation and consultation.
With the help of the General Director for the IAEA, Heinonen, we have achieved positive results. We also made progress in our bilateral cooperation and cleared the ambiguity surrounding our relationship with the IAEA. There is no need to stir doubt about our nuclear activities.
Despite of the recent statements made by the Deputy Director General of the IAEA, many members of the international community continue to be uncertain towards the possibilities of resolving the Iranian nuclear file peacefully.
How to implement it? We have structured a plan for our future correspondences. We were able to shed light on a number of unclear issues in the Iranian nuclear file. If the current situation persists, we will be in favor of a peaceful nuclear program in Iran.
The position of the IAEA might take away from the pressure that is currently being put on Iran through different practices by the United Nations and applied sanctions. Heinonen, the Deputy Director General of the IAEA, visited Iran and said that he will be submitting a report to the United Nations Council in the upcoming few days. In his report, he will be discussing the cooperation of Iran, something that might be described as a cooling breeze in the middle of this hot summer. Ahmed Al-Bahrani, Dubai TV, Tehran.
During its regular meeting, the Turkish National Security Council discussed the recent developments at the national and international levels. It also urged the government to take necessary measures to preserve the integrity of Turkey's secular system and implement the Memorandum of Understanding signed with Iraq regarding a military action against the Kurdistan Workers' Party, PKK.
The Turkish National Security Council, which includes secular hawks led by Turkey's President Ahmed Necdet Sezer, discussed the recent developments in the region. This was the last meeting presided by Sezer, who is scheduled to leave the presidential palace, Kankaya, at the end of the month. It was also the last meeting attended by the retiring chiefs of the Turkish air and naval forces. This means that a new era will begin in Turkey, where Abdullah Gül is preparing to take office and appoint new moderate military leaders.
This was the last meeting presided over by Sezer, who refused to appoint a civilian Secretary General for the National Security Council, as recommended by the government. Consequently, Abdullah Gül will be in charge of appointing a non-military Secretary General for the Council. In addition, several new moderate military leaders are expected to attend the Council's next meeting.
The Council discussed several issues, including a proposal by the Turkish minority, which called on the government to preserve the secular system from a growing threat posed by Islamic blocs, including the Justice and Development Party, as well as the PKK separatists. The Council recommended a military action against the PKK and warned against admitting the Democratic Society Party in the Turkish parliament. Many Turkish military leaders believe that the Democratic Society Party is indeed the political wing for the PKK.
The Council recommended the implementation implementation of the Memorandum of Understanding signed by Al-Maliki. This memo will serve as the platform which can be used to help carry out a military action against the PKK. We will discuss the military option with Iraq's Interior Minister during his upcoming visit to Turkey. The Council also called for a halt of oil exploration in the territorial water of northern Cyprus.
The Council discussed the outcomes of Iraq's Prime Minister Nouri al-Maliki's visit to Ankara and the Memorandum of Understanding and its implementation. It also called on the government to refrain from offering new concessions to the European Union in exchange for an unguaranteed membership. The end of the hawk era in the Turkish National Security Council, which falls in the EU sphere of influence, indicates that it has lost momentum in the political decision-making process. Having said that, the army still has the last word in any strategic decisions, especially which have to do with the protection of the country's secular system. Mohammed Al-Abbasi, Al-Alam, in front of the Republican Palace, Ankara.
محمد العباسي العالم من أمام القصر الجمهوري أنقرة.
Joining us now from our Tel Aviv studio to discuss army operations in the Gaza Strip is former advisor to the Prime Minister and military expert, Dr. Raanan Gisin of the Institute for National Security Studies. Dr. Gisin, thanks for joining us this evening.
Good evening.
Is it only a matter of time before a massive ground operation in Gaza will be launched?
Well, I think the situation has changed dramatically today with the kind of warfare that can be conducted and is useful in Gaza. I don't think the question is whether there should be a massive operation. Rather, the question is how are we going to sustain this pressure on Hamas throughout the summer and later on up to the conference in November? Because what we have today in Gaza is a ticking time bomb. And it's ticking because Hamas is continuing to rearm itself, continuing to smuggle weapons into the territories, and increasing its military buildup. And I think this is the one element which we must take care. No one is going to take care of that. At the same time, we have to keep the access to Gaza open for humanitarian purposes and advise the world and show the world that as far as humanitarian care, we take that into consideration, but we are going also to apply the pressure on Hamas in the same kind of operation that we conduct currently. Sustained pressure, full court pressure. I think that's the real answer to come to the conference in November with some chances of success for this important meeting. First of all, to keep them away from the fence. And that's on the, I would say, the tactical, immediate level. But in the longer term, I think putting them under sustained pressure will require them to divert more effort to try and stop the attacks and less to try and disrupt the process. And I also think that in the meantime, the Palestinian people will see for which side the bread is spread.
New York City's first ever Arab cultural school is facing opposition before it's even welcomed its first students. The school will teach the Arabic language and have lessons on Arabic culture. But opponents claim it's really an attempt to promote radical Islam. Al Jazeera's Kristen Salumi has more.
The Al-Khulaidi children are growing up in the United States, and for their Yemeni parents, it's very important that they can speak Arabic.
And growing up here where you're in school speaking English 24/7, and then you're with surrounding of friends who speak English, it's very hard to keep your language.
So when they found out a new public school with a special emphasis on Arabic language and culture was opening in this existing building, they jumped at the chance to send 10-year-old Ahmad.
I think I'm gonna have a great time there.
The Khalil Gibran International Academy is one of several so-called dual-language schools in New York run by the local authority. It's named after a Lebanese Christian poet who wrote his best work while living in New York. But that hasn't stopped critics, calling themselves the Stop the Madrasa Coalition, who say the school will promote a radical Islamist agenda.
Oh, I think it's possible to teach Arab culture without teaching terrorism. I mean, I think that you have to be careful because history is always shaded by political views. So I don't think one is synonymous with the other, but it requires a real careful delineation.
The Stop the Madrasa coalition, backed by anti-immigration and pro-Iraq war groups, has been making trouble for the school and the right-wing press. The first principal of the school, Debbie Al-Montazer, was attacked for speaking out against U.S. policy in the Middle East, and finally resigned for failing to condemn the use of the highly charged word intifada on a T-shirt. She was replaced by a Jewish woman. Supporters say the school will not teach Islam. Deborah Howard was part of the team that designed the curriculum.
It's a public school. We all know that public schools cannot be faith-based. And there's nothing about it that has to do with Islam. It's Arabs, Arab culture, culture of the Middle East. The focus, of course, is dual language. And so the goal is that every child graduates fluent in Arabic.
The plan was to open the school with 60 students and expand in years to come. So far, only about 45 have signed up for the coming semester, and the majority of them are not of Arabic descent. Community activists of all faiths and races are voicing their support for the school.
It represents a gift of vision, a vision of tolerance, of cooperation, of community understanding. That's what New York is about, that's what New York should be about, and that's certainly the vision that the Academy was based on and founded on.
What's happened with this situation is a great deal of misinformation about the school, about Debbie, and about Arab organizations in our communities.
And proponents say that's exactly why a school promoting Arab cultural understanding is needed in this part of the world. Kristen Salumi, Al Jazeera, New York.
I'm Amy Goodman, host of Democracy Now!, here to ask you for support for Mosaic, world news from the Middle East. You know, in media news, a new study shows that corporate news coverage of the Iraq War has dropped sharply in the last 4 months. According to the Project for Excellence in Journalism, the Iraq War accounted for just 15% of news coverage, 19% of the network evening newscasts. We need more coverage of the Middle East, not less. We are talking right now about living in a time of war, and it is up to us in a democratic society to decide what to do about that. Mosaic provides information from the Middle East, from countries in the Middle East, from a Middle Eastern perspective. It is invaluable. And right now they need $200,000 to continue their work, to continue their coverage, to bring you their fall lineup of this essential program. The number to call to make your pledge is 866-485-8848. That's 866-485-8848. You can also pledge online at linktv.org. Please pledge as much as you can. Information is power. When you have information, you are empowered to do something about it. That's what Mosaic provides. Again, they're trying to raise $200,000. In order to do this, you can be a small or large part of that. Pledge 25, pledge 50, pledge 200, pledge 500. Mosaic needs you. If you've needed Mosaic for information, now they're asking you to help them reach their goal. That number again is 866-485-8848. That's 866-485-8848. Make your pledge, make it now. You can also pledge online at linktv.org. That number is the lifeline for Mosaic. 866-485-8848. Make the call that makes the difference. This is viewer-sponsored media. You are the engine of this program. Mosaic provides a unique perspective from many different countries in the Middle East. Please give your support to independent media, 866-485-8848. And thanks so much.
Mosaic needs your support. Help us reach our goal to raise $200,000 by the end of the year to keep Mosaic on the air. Pledge your gift today at 1-866-485-8848 or linktv.org. Get more news about the Middle East online at linktv.org/Mosaic. The Mosaic webpage offers a complete archive of Mosaic programs, program transcripts, the Mosaic video podcast, and the Mosaic Intelligence Report, a weekly analysis of the hottest stories from the Middle East. The views expressed on Mosaic are those of the participating broadcasters, not Link TV or its sponsors. The production of Mosaic is made possible with the support of viewers like you. Thank you. This program was brought to you by Link TV for educational and non-commercial use only. Link TV is the only U.S. television network devoted to global and national news, with uncompromising documentaries and diverse cultural programs. Programs which connect you to the world.